Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast, recording live from the flaming hellscape wasteland that is Texas in the middle of frickin' July. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. We are crammed together at a very small desk right now. It's not quite as close quarters as it was when we were sharing a mic a few weeks ago. But this is definitely just a little closer together than we normally do this.
This is a massive desk.
Well,
Let's just be very clear.
There's a lot of stuff on the desk, and it's like pushing us kind of closer together.
That's because you live like a pig in a sty.
I feel like that was unfairly targeted.
I mean, look, this is your desk, and there is probably... this is probably a full 4 feet of desk, and we're squeezed into roughly 2 feet of usable area because you have many things.
You know, I do live in a certain amount of functional disarray. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's fair. Mm-hmm. I feel like we might have to go to some family therapy here after this episode.
This isn't new. This isn't
okay.
New. No,
all
we're
right.
fine.
Okay.
You live in your functional artistic disarray. I live in a very orderly, clean environment. I offered for us to do this at my apartment where things are orderly and clean, and I was told no. So here we are in the dysfunction.
If we were at your apartment, then you would be able to gaze upon these beautiful Tears of the Kingdom posters that arrived today, which we'll be shipping out to all buyers. Everyone who purchased one, getting that done next week sometime. You get to gaze upon the brilliance, Matt.
Well, yes, obviously that is a definite benefit, but you said, and I am only disputing that we're at a small desk. This is a truly large desk.
Okay, fair enough.
Last week, we were at a very small desk. That was the circumference of that circular table was like a foot.
So that was 2 weeks ago, Matt.
Whatever. You know what I mean. Anyway, point being, the last time we were co-located and I was not the one dialing into the call, we were at a truly small table. This is just a dysfunctional table.
Do you think the size of a desk bit has kind of run its course at this point in the episode?
I think we could let it die. Yeah, sure.
That's fair. I think what would be a far more interesting thing to talk about is an introduction to our guest of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonder from down under, you know him, you love him, Mr. Cody Davies joining us for the first time in season 9 of this show. Cody, how you doing, buddy?
G'day. I'm a bit, you might be able to tell I've sort of recovered mostly from a cold, but my voice is still a little bit hoarse at the moment.
We're glad that you pulled through. I would have hated for you to have perished. You know, we feel like you really bring something to this production and to the world in general. And it would just be a shame if if this cold was the thing that took you down, Cody. We don't want that. So definitely glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. I'm always happy to be here. And I especially love seasons where you're not happy to be here because I think it makes for the best podcast.
It's really weird. I'm trying to figure out if the mood that we're in over this game, if like our thoughts and feelings on it thus far are I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if we're enjoying ourselves more or less than we were when we were doing like Zelda 2, for instance, which is not me necessarily trying to litigate whether this game is a better game than Zelda 2 right this second. But I don't know. It's weird because in some ways I actually look back on my time with Zelda 2 and think to myself, oh, yeah, I think I was having a little bit more fun doing that. But that also might just be like rose-colored glasses, if you can call them that. That might be like the recency bias of these trials and tribulations
Feel free to next week play some Zelda 2 and try and beat one of those iron knuckles while you're in a small tunnel. And you won't feel any more like, oh, that was a great past experience. You'll feel like, oh, this game, I hate it. So,
I think there's probably something to
I was about
that.
to say, I think he's onto something there, because like my immediate thought to your little spiel there, Lyndon, was I actually think I did enjoy my time with Zelda 2 more. And then like Cody said that, and I was like, no, I definitely don't think that I did. That game was definitely really, really hard. I don't know, like there's definitely, we can talk about correlation versus causation for our misery making for good pod, but I think that is an undeniable fact that some of our best seasons and best episodes have been when we've had some things to talk about that were not just, this was awesome.
When we've had some real nits to pick.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So is this going to be another one of those kinds of weeks? Probably.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It
Spoiler
definitely is.
alert. Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I have heard that there's light at the end of the tunnel, though, Matt. Everyone keeps saying that next week's content is where this game kind of picks up and starts getting to be a lot more fun and sort of comes into its own. And wouldn't you know it, we're bringing our distinguished guest of the evening back for that appearance as well. So, Cody, we're going to have a double trouble rock block of episodes here, and we're going to see if we actually do go on a journey from everything we're going to talk about this week to maybe a slightly more rosy and cheery subject matter next week. It'll be interesting.
I think it will be an interesting one next week. As you would know from the format of any Zelda game, most of the plot changes and stuff tend to happen around this next point where you get the three orbs of call it, and then, the big thing happens, and then you have to get the 5 other important things. Like in Ocarina of Time, that was the point where he turned into an adult for the first time. And in other games, it's led to other big things. So I won't say it's, as big as turning into an adult or anything, but I think this is a narrative heavy game. And so getting to the part where the interesting narrative stuff happens is valuable. Like, this is a game that is... I've made a lot of comparisons to Skyward Sword in the Discord server between this and Skyward Sword, which, that's not... I realize that you're not having that much fun at the moment with this game, but I think it's not just a negative to compare it to Skyward Sword here. I think it shares a lot of Skyward Sword's positives. Like, if you look at the dungeons, if you look at the amount of narrative that happens between each chapter... the characters, that kind of thing. They're sort of strong points of the game. And so, I do think, it's not going to change everything. We're still going to have to go through the Temple of the Ocean King more and more, etc. But, I do think it's a game that it's a story game, and the story is going to happen soon.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think I've been saying from the beginning of this season that the story that they are trying to tell is one of the things that's intriguing me about this game the most. So I'm definitely excited for that to take a few steps forward. Of course, we're going to talk about all of those things here before too long. We're going to get into some episode, really break it down. Before we do that, Cody, I got to ask you, I don't think we have spoken much, just a little bit on Discord here and there since the last time you were on. Obviously, we've got a lot more kind of Tears of the Kingdom under all of our belts since that time. How are y'all at Zelda Universe doing over there? I mean, I think the initial craze and furor has kind of died down just a little bit. But I'm wondering if y'all are still a little underwater, just kind of keeping up with all the new stuff there is to talk about.
Yeah, it's. I mean, in some ways it's busy, in other ways it's quiet. We are, everything's ticking along. People are still playing through the game. We are still enforcing a spoiler policy about, releasing major stuff. So in that sense, we're not sort of as busy as we could be if we'd sort of thought, all right, we're done with worrying about spoilers, let's just do everything now. But, it's all still happening. People are using the Zelda Maps website more and more, zeldamaps.com, because if you don't have a way to track your Koroks and caves and all this kind of thing, it's quite a hassle if you're trying to complete the game in 100% capacity.
Yeah, I was reading a post on Reddit earlier today about a person who was trying to reach 100% in Tears of the Kingdom, was stuck at like 99, or say it's like 97.2 or something like that. Just could not figure out what they were missing. Had all the Korok seeds, defeated every enemy, done all the things. And somebody commented on that post, said, hey, if you didn't realize this, caves with 2 separate entrances, progression is tied to like each instance. So in order to completely 100% the game, you have to get the title to pop on like both entrances to that cave.
Oh, that's so annoying.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, if this is something that you're actually trying to do, then one, God help you. There is so much stuff to find in this game. But two, then ZeldaMaps.com sure sounds like a good resource to me. I don't know about you, Matt. Sounds pretty useful.
Sounds pretty great. The interactive maps are a real thing of modern, amazing technology.
Yep. Go check it out. It's an incredible tool. And yeah, we're glad to hear you're staying busy, Cody. I know that it was, it was the real doldrums out there in the world of Zelda news for a very long time. And, this is the period we've all been waiting for. So I'm glad it hasn't been boring or anything like that. But of course, we will catch up with more of these things a bit later on in future episodes, find out how that situation continues to evolve. Cody and Matt, are y'all ready to talk about a little Phantom Hourglass here?
You mean Phantom Hoass?
Phantom Hoass, as Matt has affectionately started calling it. There is an actual...
There's an in-joke about
explain
that.
It's not just something you came up with off the top of your head.
No, I mean, so I type out all of our plot recaps and save them on my laptop, and I went into the subfolder where I have them, and all of their titles were abbreviated to Phantom Ho ... ass, and I thought that was truly hilarious.
Doesn't take a lot to get you to chuckle, does it, Matt?
That's really funny. That's really you can't even deny that. That is really funny.
It made me smile. I cracked a smile. Yeah, but I'm easy to entertain too. So.
Well, there's a reason we entertain ourselves and nobody else.
There you go. I think you're onto something there. All right. Let's get into some housekeeping, dive right into this episode because we have a lot to talk about. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game. Then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and so much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Tom, Gavin, Stephanie, Deck Officer, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Il Maestro himself, Darknuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Travis, Christian, Jonathan, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals. We appreciate them very much, and I would fight a giant invisible crab monster with any of them at any given time, preferably with as many of them as possible, because I really do feel like a greater force in numbers would result in a greater probability of survival in that scenario.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm down for group fights. Group melees sound really fun to me. So let's do it. Let's all get in a big arena and go after a bad guy.
That sounds great. What is this that you just handed me, Matt?
The initial review that you did for our show 2 years ago when we started is a 1-star review.
There's no way I did that.
Yeah, look, it's literally right there. I can't make it up. It's a 1-star.
Oh my gosh, I've been sabotaging this whole operation from the beginning.
Yes, you have. You need to go fix that. if you can.
Okay. All right. Wow. I wonder what horrible confluence of circumstances allowed that to happen.
I don't know. Yeah. Also, it looks like our 2-star review that was belligerent us for having political views has disappeared. So I wonder if it got reported.
Are we back up to a 5.0?
We would be if you didn't have a 1.0 star on our show.
Damn it. All right. Well, sorry, y'all. I guess this is where I have to pack it in, right? Like,
yeah, you killed your own show. Good job.
It's been a great run, y'all. This would be the time to hang it up, though, wouldn't it? I'm just kidding. Yeah. We're having a great time. This is so much fun to do, even when we're having, maybe a less good time with the actual game than we normally do. Mm-hmm. I think I would say it's even it's just as fun as it is any other time.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what, Matt? It sounds like we have a 5-star review to let off the chain. So how about you go pick your favorite of those? Do it this episode. Then next episode we'll do the other one.
Cool. Well, then we'll just go in chronological order. How about that? That makes me happy.
Sounds good to me.
From Feckalooz on July 6th. I listen to a lot of Zelda podcasts, and the content these Texas gentlemen bring is top tier. They have a really great structure for their episodes and interesting guests. The show is very balanced with lore, analytics, insight, and everything anyone could want from a Zelda pod. Can't say enough good things about this pod. Well, thank you, Feckalooz. We do try very hard to keep a balanced approach and make sure everyone gets just a little dose of what they want, including ourselves, and we dose our own ego on a daily basis. So thank you for joining us in that endeavor.
What you're really just watching is Matt's lead into becoming a professional audiobook recorder. That's what this whole thing has been about.
I don't think anyone would want to listen to my wet mouth noises that much.
I feel like professionals of a certain caliber are worrying about those less than I am.
That's probably true. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, cool. All right, y'all. That's been the housekeeping. Let's get out of that section, get into the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is, of course, a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering Phantom Hourglass, Chapter 3. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, of course, the plot recap, usually read by Matt. Tonight, also read by Matt. Hey, Cody, what do you think is the over-under on this plot recap being longer or shorter than last week's?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what he got up to. There are a couple of optional things in here.
I guess we'll find out. Let's go ahead with that out of the way and dive into part 1, which is the plot recap as read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
We depart the blustery island of the Temple of Winds with our new friend Neri in tow and set course back to Murkay Island. We know by now that the next clue to our journey is deeper in the Temple of the Ocean King, so we waste no time in getting there and diving straight in. However, we unexpectedly encounter all the same traps, phantoms, and blockers in our way that we cleared last time we were here. This poses quite an annoyance as we clear them again, but this time we take careful note of them on our map, just in case we ever have to do this again. After the grueling trip back through the obstacles, we arrive in a new lower floor of the temple with new traps and enemies. One of these enemies are the Phantom Eyes, which are literally flying eyeballs that sound alarms whenever they spot us to summon phantoms to attack. Neri tells us, and Ciela annoyingly repeats that we should find a way to kill them before they can spot us by using ranged attacks. Taking this bit of advice, we keep moving through the temple to find our next clue. Eventually, we come to the final room where we have to decipher a secret symbol to inscribe upon the door in order for it to open. We use 6 stone tablets around the room to discover the correct drawing pattern and proceed inside to find the clue. Inside the room, we find a large stone circle with rays on the edge that make it look like a sun. We look closer at the stone tablet and see what looks like a sea map, but it is an oddly upside-down iteration of the southwestern sea. The next symbol, marking our next clue, is a series of crescent moons nestled within each other. But it is in the middle of the ocean instead of on an island. Perplexed, we nonetheless take an etching of the location of this clue and head back to the surface. Once we arrive back in town, we get a letter from the creepy Birdman-child hybrid that originated from the Cannon Maker. This letter tells us that he has finished his latest masterpiece, the salvage arm. The folks at the dock are also in a tizzy about this new piece of technology, which is very similar to the one we used on our last journey across the Great Sea, which will allow those who possess it to scrape up treasure from the bottom of the sea. Seeing as this may be the solution to our clue, we head back to Ito's workshop to purchase this useful gadget. For some unknown reason, this asshat wants us to yell at him to lower the price of his salvage arm, and despite the annoyance it causes to the significant others of our intrepid players, we give it a shout so we don't have to pay a ridiculous sum of 1,000 rupees. Instead, we pay a mere 200 and sulkily leave the shop. We head to the spot marked on the map and do some deep-sea treasure hunting. We pull up a chest containing an ornate key with the shape of the sun on it, which will undoubtedly lead to our next temple. With no clue as to where to head next, we rack our memory for anything that would be helpful. We remember seeing a sun-shaped stone in the hideaway of Romanos' father, so with no other leads, we set sail for Melita Island. As we approach the island, the skies darken and the sea begins to roil. A giant eyeball emerges from the waves and begins lobbing acidic spiked balls toward us without warning. We start sailing about in an evasive pattern and use the cannon to rain fire on this monster that blocks our way. Eventually, it is destroyed and the way to Melita Island is open. When we land, we head for the hideout and rediscover the sun-shaped door. The key we brought up from the ocean depths fits perfectly, and the door opens to a new section of the island. As we explore this segment of the island, we find the Temple of Courage, but the door is blocked by an immovable wall of iridescent blue stone. The plaque next to this door says, "Only statues can urge the temple doors to open, so focus their light gaze on it." Not entirely sure what this means at this point, we continue our exploration around the island. We eventually find some very odd-looking stone heads with glowing eyes, and assume that these are the statues we need to focus. With a brief smack of our sword or a boomerang, it activates and shoots a blue laser beam from its eyes. We turn the statue so that it focuses this laser on the door to the temple, and set off to find more. We find two more of these heads, one near the entrance to this secluded section of the island, which has to be hit with the boomerang, and another that is guarded by two extremely ferocious Zora warriors. Once all three statues are shooting their laser eyes at the stone door, it recedes into the ground and opens the way to the Temple of Courage. We've tackled literally over a dozen temples in our various adventures, and each one has had unique challenges. The Temple of Courage is no different in this regard, and it has a lot in store for us as we dive in to free the last of the trapped spirits. Rolling spike traps, blocked off passages, puzzles requiring crystals, and even invisible walkways all abound in this place. The multi-level labyrinth seems designed to confound and confuse more than to test courage, but we press on regardless. After progressing for a bit, we enter a room that seals behind us and spawns two extremely wicked-looking centipede creatures. These foul beasts aren't too terribly hard to kill with some hits to their tails, and we move further on into the temple. As we keep going, we come to find a handy bow and arrow in the temple that allow us to effectively slay enemies from afar. Adding this powerful weapon to our arsenal, we start finding new ways to progress through the temple. The eyes that stare at us from walls are closed with our arrows, and this opens new paths forward. There are switches that need to be hit and useful devices in the lower floors that allow for our arrows to be diverted in new directions so that obstacles can be removed from our path. The last puzzle we come across requires us to move a block around in a specific pattern to shoot 4 eyes in sequence. Up, down, right, then left is the secret to the temple, according to a stone tablet, so we use this hint to shoot the eyes in sequence. The boss key appears for us and we head to confront the evil force keeping the spirit of courage captive. We head into the boss room and at first it appears to be completely empty, but once the door closes behind us we hear a massive scuttling noise. From nowhere, a humongous beetle crab-like creature appears from thin air and shrieks its challenge. it rapidly recloaks itself and we can hear it scuttle away. We start moving around the closed-off arena, unsure of how to hit something we can't see. So we decide to post up in a corner to prevent being attacked from the rear and listen as hard as we can for any sign of our aggressor. We decide to take aim with the bow and let an arrow fly at the first sign of scuttling noise that we hear. Our first shot misses, but we fire more arrows toward the noise and eventually strike something sensitive. The creature becomes visible and starts spinning wildly as it withdraws into its shell, and we notice some bulbous purple protrusions at the base of its shell and start hacking away with our sword. After a brief time, it appears to recover enough to go invisible once more, and we begin the cycle again. After a couple more rounds of shoot the invisible monster, we destroy the last of the purple protrusions, and the creature's shell completely explodes, leaving only the fleshy crab monster with its gigantic claws and spiked tail to deal with. We immediately shoot for the head, only to be blocked by its claws, but we notice that it takes a long while to recover from this guarded position, so we use the opportunity to move around to the rear and strike at its tail. The tail appears to be the weak spot, so we keep hacking away until the vile monster is vanquished. Just as with our other two foes, Kraik explodes in a shower of golden sand, which we capture in the Phantom Hourglass, and the symbol of courage appears in the center of the ring. The spirit of courage emerges from the nested crescent moons. This spirit is pure white, much like our friend Ciela, and doesn't give us its name or even say a single word. Ciela seems perturbed by this, but unsure of what to do about it. With yet another mystery on our hands, we take this mute fairy into our company and set our sights back towards the Temple of the Ocean King. Hopefully, we'll be able to figure out how this spirit of courage will be able to help us before we arrive, so that we can find the final clue to the ghostly ship and the location of our dear friend Tetra.
Well done, as always, Matt. Let's get into part 2.
Oh, a round of applause from Cody? That was nice. Yay.
You know what?
Thank you, sir.
That makes me happy for you, Matt. I think, you know what? I agree with Cody. I think that deserved a little bit of a clap.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
That was good. I think at some point in our Discord, somebody mentioned that maybe at one point in the future, it would be fun to actually cut these together into some kind of rough audio book format. I don't know if that would actually be any fun to listen to, but it's an intriguing idea to think about.
We definitely need to find somewhere to host these, so at least the written format, which would require someone to go proofread my horrible grammar and spelling. But yeah, we do want to find a place to host these so they can be easily accessible for people.
Our amateur credentials would definitely be the biggest blocker towards that.
No doubt.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But either way, it was very well done, very well executed. Let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game, how it made us feel. Okay, so here's what I want to do. And Cody, I'm going to ask you to bear with me for 1 minute. I really do feel like and I think both Matt's and my experience with this section of game this week deserves a little bit of storytelling up here at the front of this section. I would usually pass it to the guest first. But what I would really like to do is to explain my tale of woe real quick here, and then just open it up to the group to talk about. So, Cody, if that sounds fine to you, then I think that's the way that we'll do it.
Yeah, I'm very interested.
Okay, all right. So I call this the tragedy of Darth Lyndon the Unwise.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
So here's how this, and I will say, this entire spiel that I'm about to go on, this entire bitch fest that I'm about to drop on our listeners contains only stuff that takes place before we get into the dungeon this week, and that is notable. That's important.
I actually feel the exact same way. Yes.
So with that disclaimer out of the way, let me set the stage for y'all. I am on a cross-country flight coming back to Texas from Seattle. I've spent the last week, as listeners will know, in the Pacific Northwest, visiting the Bungie headquarters, meeting friends, meeting frequent guests of the show, Max Nichols, having a grand old time. I'm on the plane heading back to Austin to meet up with some friends to float the river this weekend. And I'm deciding to get my chunk of Phantom Hourglass out of the way for the week. So I load into the game. I know that I'm going to have to go back to the Temple of the Ocean King. That's one of those things I know about this game. I know we're going to be making frequent visits, right? And to be honest, our experiences in the temple up until this point have had me kind of wondering why people were saying that was such a terrible thing. Like, obviously, we have some gripes about forced stealth mechanics and whether or not those are a fun thing in and of themselves. But overall, I would say that I have not been disliking those to an incredible degree. Like, I was definitely sitting here thinking, like, I'm looking forward to seeing how the complexity evolves as you go deeper and deeper into the temple, right? And so I have like two or three things that just, God, I can't describe how angry I was by the end of 1.5 hours of playtime on this flight. Thing number one, I get into the Temple of the freaking Ocean King, and I realize immediately what everyone was talking about, which is that you have to replay everything you've previously beaten every time you go into this stupid building. That right off the bat, just like, man, I have a lot of patience for a lot of different things in a lot of different games. And the like all this is padding. All it is like squeezing the maximum amount of game time that is possible out of one singular area. And I really, really hate that. That really, really bugged me. It was super annoying. Turned me off to, that, again, this hour and a half that I knew I had to play the game, turned me off on like put me in a bad mood almost immediately. But you know what? Whatever. I'm willing to roll with it. Let's go and see if things get any better from there. So I go beat the Temple of the Ocean King. I'm down on the very bottom floor. I have run out of time on my Phantom Hourglass. I made a few sloppy mistakes, whatever. I'm getting very, very close to the end. Ciela is telling me, hey, you're almost done with this. Isn't that great? And I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? That is great. I'm ready to be past this and to do something else. I take an unlucky hit from a phantom. I die. I'm thinking, whatever. I'll redo that floor. No big deal.
Did you totally
I spawn back in at the beginning of the Temple of the Ocean King and then have to proceed to redo every single floor again for the third time in 4 days. The whole thing.
Oh, ouch.
And y'all, when I tell you that I almost stood up in my chair and walked to the escape hatch on the plane, opened it, and threw my 3DS from the aircraft. I don't get mad playing games, man. I really don't. I really don't. I was furious. I was so angry. But I did it. Because we're making a podcast here. I was like, okay, you know what? When I get past this, it will get better. And it did get better after this, but there were still several things that were just so freaking. So like within 20 minutes of once that was done, I was going through the whole process of having to acquire the salvage arm from Ito?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm doing that whole stupid thing. And then I get to Ito and I talk to him. And I realized that I've stumbled into yet another microphone mechanic, right? And I'm sitting in the middle of a crowded airplane, right? This is the exact worst case scenario that people in the Discord have mentioned, right? Like, oh, what if you're trying to play this on the subway on a commute and you have to use the microphone, right?
Yep.
I'm like, okay, well, here I am. I'm living it, And so I'm sitting there. I'm like, you know what? It seems like this guy is going to allow me to just purchase this thing regardless of how loud I shout at my 3DS, right? Except then I get this thought in my head, oh crap, will he charge me less the louder that I shout at my console?
The answer is yes.
And so obviously his first offer is 1,000 rupees, right? And then I I find the way to make the sneakiest but still loudest noise that I possibly can at my 3DS. And then it goes down just a little bit. And now I'm thinking, crap. So I'm sitting here in the middle of this crowded airplane, torn between the impulse to save absolutely every rupee that I can in this game, but also not look like an insane person on this flight, right? And what I managed to get away with was what still was a very noticeable grunt shout that didn't alarm anybody enough on the airplane to like turn around. And I got away with this thing for 300 rupees. I'm not sure if you bellow at this thing, I don't know if you get it for free. No idea what the deal is there. But so yeah, so that happens. And look, it was a really bad hour and a half, man. Like it was not great.
So it's really funny that those are the two things that piss you off because
sorry, you didn't even get the main one.
Yeah, you didn't get to
the main one.
Yes, you are.
Which is that I get to the stupid freaking so finally get down to the bottom floor of the Temple of the Ocean King, and it's telling me something about transferring a symbol to a map. I don't know what it's talking about. I'm sitting here like rubbing the touchscreen with the stylus.
I did that for literally forever.
Every single way that I know how to do.
I put my whole palm on it. I rubbed it with my thumb.
I was doing like
stylus.
Cross hatching. Like I
tried to draw it where I thought it was supposed to go.
I have no freaking clue what I'm supposed to do with this thing. I try to leave the room like 12 times, and it's clear that I'm not allowed to leave until I figure out how to do this stupid thing. And it's a good thing that we live in the age in which we do, and I am able to spend $5 on in-flight Wi-Fi on this plane.
You paid $5 of in-flight Wi-Fi to solve this puzzle.
Yes, I did.
I am so sorry for you.
Yes, I did. Because I just couldn't, I couldn't even conceive of what the solution to this possibly could be.
Absolutely nothing.
And
not in my brains.
And honestly, like now that I know the solution, I'm kind of torn. I'm kind of torn between like on one side, I'm thinking those insane people who came up with this, those mad lads, they actually went for this.
Mm-hmm.
And like a little bit of admiration there,
Sure.
And then on the other side of things, I'm just thinking like, this is so dumb and nobody ever, there's no way
anyone solved this. Yeah. Like naturally.
My anger, like my frustration at things that had happened up until that point has probably tipped me over onto the side of like, that was a terrible idea. I don't know why you did that. But like, no. I'm actually kind of going back and forth on it in my head a little bit just for, the sake of like having an academic discussion about this. But anyway, so yeah, that was the other. And the solution to the puzzle we're talking about here is that in order to get the symbol of the Temple of Courage on your C map, you have to literally close the DS. Like you have to close the clamshell of the DS and then open it back up again. And that solves the problem, which has a few like more modern console lineup implications in terms of like why that's difficult and not a great thing. But
for anyone not using a foldable DS, it's just put it in sleep mode. So if you're using a 2DS or if you're playing on the Wii U or anything, you just have to put it in sleep mode, but don't turn it all the way off. Just put it in sleep mode and then wake it back up. It'll do the same thing. But Okay. First off, I'm going to let this rage train continue until it's all petered out.
No, that was all. Those were the primary infractions against my good mood that took place on that airplane.
So before we let Cody talk us off of this ledge of anger, hopefully, I will jump onto this rage train and ride it with you into that was a horrible mechanic. Like I was not angry leading up to this. I was peeved that I had to redo the earlier sections of Temple of the Ocean King. I was peeved, but I was 30 seconds away from having to restart the whole thing, and I would have probably thrown my DS across a room had I had to restart the entire thing again. Luckily, I did not. I got very lucky with finding plus 30 second, plus 15 second pots and just hanging out as much as possible in safe areas. So I fortunately did not have to restart, got into the map room and had to Google the solution. And once I found out what it was, I literally went, oh my God, really? So no, I'm with you. While it is a technically impressive achievement, dumb, very bad, hated it. It's stupid. I never want to do it again. My fiance was hanging out with me that night when I was playing this section of game, and I literally had to like tap her on the shoulder because she was watching something on her iPad with her earbuds in. I had to tap her on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I just need you to know I'm about to scream at my DS, and I need you to not be worried about that. It's for the pod." And she goes, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "No, I'm not actually kidding. This is seriously a mechanic of the game." And she goes, You have to be joking. No game would ever make you do that. And I was like, I show you right here. And I showed her the little text bubble from Edo. And she was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Proceed. So I proceeded to scream at my DS to get that price down to 200 rupees. And we went on with our lives. And yes, so all of that was dumb and bad. And I hated every minute of it. End rant.
Okay, Cody, we put you on the bench here for that whole sorry section. Are we crazy? Are we making too much out of not enough here?
I think that combination of issues definitely would lead to, because the thing is, I had a great time. I finished the Temple of the Ocean King with like 5 minutes remaining and didn't have to restart or anything. And I went through. I already knew about the closing puzzle. So I was just sort of like, oh, this is a pretty good little stretch of game, isn't it? But I did not realize that you did not know that you have to do all of the Temple of the Ocean King each time. That is the reason people complain about having to go back to it each time. But yeah, I thought you knew that. So yeah, sorry for you to have to find out, but it is yeah, that is the mechanic, and it will continue to be the mechanic. Next time you'll have to do all of these floors plus the next set, and so on.
Yikes.
So that's not going to change. But it will continue getting faster because there's shortcuts each time that are based on the new items you get and that kind of thing. Like if you've been noting down, oh, here's an eye for a bow, or here's a bombable spot, or that kind of thing, you'll find that you're able to do the previous floors in like a fifth of the time that you did previously because you've unlocked the shortcuts. And I think that's what Max was talking about last week, about how it's basically built to the speedrunning experience. Like the point of it is that you feel that you've gotten better each time that you go through it. Like you're gradually conquering the Temple of the Ocean King, and I think that's what they're going for. There is, by the end, you're like, oh, I've gotten through, 12 floors or whatever. In a record amount of time because I've conquered this dungeon, I've ridden down. So that's what they're going for, and I think it works for some people, but it is the number one complaint about the game. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and that's not hard to imagine. I mean, I think it's one of those things that that really just doesn't fly for people in the modern era of video games is the needless repetition of content. And I say that with a little bit of, insider perspective as like a person who works in games, and I've like heard a lot of that. Right. So, yeah, it definitely didn't, I don't know. I'm curious to see if I enjoy the process of going through the temple a little bit more once it is a little bit more turnkey. I'm open to the possibility of that being true. I will just say that as soon as it clunked into place for me, like, oh, this is the issue, this is the problem. Yeah, that was not a great feeling, and I really didn't enjoy it. And to be honest, I felt that it was somewhat beneath this series of games. I felt like it was beneath Zelda, at least at this point in its history, because I really couldn't think of anything that was quite analogous to this in the whole rest of the history of Zelda. Yeah,
it is. It's basically we've talked about how you've talked about how it's similar to this the Skyward Sword Silent Realm in function, but this was sort of the initial attempt at it, and they wanted to make it because it's basically a little speed running or perfectionist sort of section thing is something that they had going for a few games, and this is the one where they had the time limit. And I think it's got, like, personally, I'm mixed on it. Like, I do find enjoyment in conquering it, in the sense that I've taken a lot of notes on the top screen and such that have made me move through it. Like, whenever there's a plus 30 pot or whatever, I've made sure to note that down, so I've got a little route going where I'm like, I can be, because I'm the kind of person who likes to play just like Mario Kart by myself in the time trial mode, racing against ghosts or that kind of thing, because I enjoy the feeling of like, oh, I just cut 3 seconds on that run. And I think that is a legitimate feeling that people can get out of it. And so I think for some people that is quite nice, but I think it's sort of it's so niche that most of the people who experienced it didn't find it a positive, or neutral at best. So yeah, the Temple of the Ocean King, I will say that if you're taking notes that really help you, because you could just draw out a path for yourself so you don't have to think anymore on that floor once you've figured out the ideal solution, for example, that's like, oh, I'll go through here, this is where the plus 30 pot is, I'll go down, this is where you go, where you blow up the wall and go through it, there's the exit. And so, yeah, I do find some enjoyment in that, but overall I would have preferred, I think, to just not have a Temple of the Ocean King or a Silent Realms or the equivalent in Spirit Tracks that you'll also be encountering later.
Great. Don't tease us like that, Cody.
By Spirit Tracks, they get rid of the having to do all the previous floors stuff. It is still a sort of, being chased by the invisible monsters thing for another couple of games in the series. For some reason, they just made it part of the formula briefly.
Yeah. And I really do think that would be the difference for me, is like if it was just a new floor or 3 that you had to do between each dungeon, without having to redo the previous ones. Like, I think that's plenty, honestly. Like, I think that there's enough other content happening, especially in this game. Like, it's not like the stuff you have to do to get from one dungeon to the next in this game so far is particularly brief. I mean, they really do kind of load you up with some stuff, and you have to go to several locations. You have to tackle several different little things, and it's really not. It's not a game that's hurting for stuff to do exactly. So I really do think that if this went from like a, 20 to 30 minute experience, getting longer and longer as you get further into it, just have it be like a 5 or 10 minute thing where you just taking the new floors as they come, and then once they're cleared, they're cleared. I think that would have been totally fine. So I would be very curious to know like what the rationale was for just like, nope, you gotta keep doing it, gotta keep redoing it. Because I really don't think it's necessary.
Just going off that, Lyndon, I think giving us an extra 10 to 15 minutes back per week that we're playing this, I would have done a lot more exploring than I have done so far at this game. Like, this section, I was gonna try to do some exploring to find some stuff that I hadn't really engaged with, and instead I spent 12 minutes plus, it was probably more like 15, going back through the Temple of the Ocean King. And I would have much rather spent those 15 minutes going to find the mermaid or do something else. And instead, here I am rehashing puzzles I've already done.
Yeah, no, I do mostly agree. I still, I will say that I have not found the, I I have not found the desire to do much extra exploration in this game yet, as I have in some other Zelda games. Not necessarily in a bad way. I think that one of the things, we keep talking about the ways in which this game is similar to like Skyward Sword and other Zelda games of the era. And I really do think that there is something there. And in some good ways, in addition to some of the negative ways that we're talking about. And one of those is, Cody, you mentioned this just a minute ago, but just the fact that, you really are kind of, you're having fun and meaningful things to do that are directly within your path to the next dungeon, right? And so, like, usually when I'm doing side questy stuff in a Zelda game, it's to fill my time between dungeons, right? But that time is already kind of filled as is, and also maybe it's just that the hints are not necessarily as intriguing as they should be to be funneling me towards side quest stuff. I think there's a little bit of that as well currently. Like I would say there's aside from the mermaid, which even that I'm kind of like, I'm a little unclear right now on whether or not that's something I'm supposed to be doing now or later. There was a mini game. There was a fun mini game this week, and I kind of enjoyed messing around with that. But for the most part, there's not quite as many things that are diverting my attention, as we say in Bloopy Trails, as there are in other Zelda games. But I don't know. I just it's tough for me to see the Temple of the Ocean King as anything but bloat. What I really do want to talk about, though, and then kind of move on to more general thoughts about this entire section of the game past just what made us angry about it, is this mechanic of having to close the DS to complete the map, which on one hand, I've spent enough time in Zelda circles online over the last 20 years that I'm really shocked that I didn't know that this was a thing and had never heard about it. And so I like, obviously for you, Cody, it's not such of a much because you just knew that it was a thing that's going to happen. But I don't know. I like, how do people feel about this, generally speaking? Like, you spend a lot of time in these in fan communities and stuff. So
yeah, I think some people are frustrated by it, and some people think it's actually a really fun thing. Just out of the box thinking that, so I definitely you were in sort of the worst conditions to experience a lot of this stuff, like having to do sound mechanics while on a plane and having to have a difficult out-of-the-box puzzle while having no access to the internet and having to pay $5, for the privilege of looking up the Zelda dungeon. It's I definitely understand that, but I don't think it's inherently like a bad or anything, I guess. Like I think it is something that is I don't know. The comparison that came to mind for me was thinking of Metal Gear Solid. I don't know if either of you have played it.
Neither of us have. However, okay. I am very much looking forward to playing the Legacy Collection when it comes out and whenever that happens. It's a huge gap in my gaming knowledge, and I love stealth games. So I'm very interested to play.
We did play Splinter Cell.
Yes, we did play Splinter Cell, but not Metal Gear Solid.
So Metal Gear Solid is a game series that sort of in some ways takes itself seriously, and other ways that not at all takes itself seriously. And there's a situation with like a boss in the first game where it's basically like, oh, he's got psychic powers, he can tell everything you'll do. And what you need to do is you need to plug in a second controller, and he can't use his psychic powers to guess what you'll do with the second controller. And it's just a really, really fun out-of-the-box thing that's also like, in a way, it's a nightmare of like, how was I supposed to know that? But like, it's also just a very like funny story to tell for whenever you come back to talk about this game, And I think with Phantom Hourglass, that's something that's, when I think of puzzles in Phantom Hourglass, I'm like, I remember the time when you had to close your DS to imprint the thing, which it didn't give no clues. It and it did have the upside down thing, and so it's not that they didn't provide clues, but just that it's not something you would consider doing because it's sort of a meta thing. It's like a breaking the fourth wall thing. So I think it's a very interesting puzzle, but I understand why it would be divisive.
Yeah. I think, and I obviously Matt has already said he kind of comes down very much on the side of it's a bad thing and a bad idea. And I'm really trying to be more objective about it. I do think it's one of those things where I do want to be a little hardline about this and say, like, look, if there's no precedent for this previously established in a game, then it's really hard for me to call it a good example of game design, right? Because this is just so totally out of the blue. There's nothing in the world that would have trained you or prepared you to know that this is something that you might have to do to progress the game. I just don't know that I'm ever going to feel any different way about it than that. But also, like I said earlier, I have to begrudgingly admire the decision to do something like this because, people do, like, it is a point of some consternation that games at a certain point can all become a little samey, right? And make safe decisions. And you have games that are a little bit too similar to other games, and it's difficult to like iterate in truly new and fun and exciting ways. And I don't know if something like this is necessarily a direct solution to that criticism. But I do say, I do have to say, kudos to y'all for just giving it a shot. Like, it is wild. It is off the wall. It is kind of goofy and cutesy. And I could see an argument for it being a little bit of a charming thing to have done. I just, like I said, I caught it at a point where I was already a little peeved at some things that were happening. So impossible to dismiss that.
Yeah. And I think because I guess looking at it from the perspective of like when you both played A Link Between Worlds recently, the negative that you took away from it, I guess, was that it's too safe.
Yeah, I think that would be, if you were to distill it all down into one core point, I think that'd probably be it.
Like, it's too safe, it's too smooth, everything works well, everything functions well. It doesn't necessarily have rough edges that are the part that stick with you at the end, after you've played the game. And, and Zelda 2 is all rough edges, but then you come around but then you come around now and you're fondly remembering Zelda 2, like, oh, I remember when I conquered that, that iron knuckle. And the roughness of just like, they tried some wild stuff. They expected you to do some ridiculous feats. And it was annoying, but I got through it, is a kind of experience that that sticks with you. And so for me, A Link Between Worlds was, a godsend because I'd been frustrated by you can see even in Phantom Hourglass, it's sort of heading towards the Skyward Sword point of like, not really an overworld. There's plenty of stuff to do, but it's all stuff that's narratively structured. Like, you're doing it because there's 3 steps before you get to the dungeon and they've crafted it out for you. And I wanted more of just a, wander around doing whatever you want kind of thing. And then, A Link Between Worlds comes out and I'm like, oh, they're interested in just like being very good at the original premise of The Legend of Zelda. And so that was exciting to me. But, I sort of thought that this podcast might actually enjoy. I think I underestimated the degree to which just the controls and stuff are frustrating to get into. But I sort of thought, oh, this is the podcast that said, Skyward Sword, that's the third best video game in the world. Number 3.
Yeah, of all time,
yes.
No questions asked.
Yes.
And so I thought, oh, this is a game where the dungeons, we'll get to, you sort of alluded to it and we'll get to it at a later point, but I think the dungeons have just been consistently good, for example, and the narrative structure of it and everything. Like if you compare this to the story section when you play A Link to the Past in the early stages, for example, getting to the, Desert Palace or whatever, it's like, oh, we're wandering around. I'm wandering around in the library, found a book, wandered over to the palace. I don't know how we're supposed to find the book, but here we are. Open the door. That's the story between sections in A Link to the Past are there. Whereas this was like, oh, we met this person. They had this story. They have this story about their father who's an adventurer and who's gotten lost, and we went in to look for this. And, there's a lot of, so in that sense, I think Phantom Hourglass is something that's it's got the good parts of Skyward Sword as well. But it is just a very frustrating game full of gimmicks that is sort of overloaded with gimmicks to the point where it's like, calm down, Nintendo, But, I think that distracts from a quite good game in a lot of other ways. But, let me see what else I might have had in my notes for this section.
While you're pulling that up, Cody, real quick, I do just want to say, to your point where you were saying that, there seem to be a few core issues that are really acting as sticking points for us as we're going into this. I don't want to speak for Matt. I don't know how he feels about it. I will say that for me, that point that I was saying, I was wondering if it was ever going to happen 2 weeks ago, especially in regards to the controls, where it just kind of was becoming a little bit more natural and was like I was becoming more comfortable with it. I will say that I think I got to that point this week. I would still not be over here saying that I want future top-down Zelda games to be using stylus controls in this way. Versus just traditional joystick or D-pad or whatever. But I will say that I don't think there was any point this week where I was fighting against it. I think I've kind of gotten to the point where I know what it is. I know how to do it. I know how to interact with it appropriately. And it's not a hindrance at any point anymore. So that was fun. That was a fun moment of realization. And it really was kind of back and forth there for a minute. But I don't know, Matt, how'd you feel about that? Are you in kind of a similar place right now?
So I'm not there, honestly. The movement aspect is still fine, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed the arrows. I think arrows are another great item. I'm actually finding most of the items to work functionally very well with the touch controls, like the precision with which you can throw bombs, the arrows, and the really fun boomerang mechanic. Excuse me, I had a hiccup there. All of them are really fun, and I think the touch controls are very good for that. I'm still having such a hard time with moving while engaging in combat. The dual Zora warrior fight that we have leading up to the temple. I died during it just because I couldn't switch between my boomerang, draw a path to hit one or both of them, and then also move, and then also hit with a sword. Like I couldn't get into a rhythm where I was doing those things fluidly enough to where I wasn't just taking massive amounts of damage. And that's very, very frustrating. Maybe it's a me problem, but I just am not there currently.
So, Matt, Are you using the shoulder buttons? This came up as a hint in the starting village or whatever, just someone you talk to, but I don't know if it's if people necessarily came across it, but you can use the L and R shoulder buttons to activate the items, and that really helps me with like the speed of having to do like a boomerang thing instantaneously rather than having to tap on it and then go around.
I was completely unaware of this.
Yeah, I did not know that. No.
Yeah, completely unaware.
Okay. So that may change your experience. This is an early part 7 Cody's tips. The shoulder buttons, you can activate items, and it gives you like an extra half second of like reaction time on that fight with the 2 Zora warriors probably would have made a big difference for you.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah.
And it would really cut down on. So one of the things that I am finding still frustrating is just like having my items toggled on basically. And then like trying to go swing a sword, but remembering like, oh crap, you still have your shovel out, you still have your bow out or whatever. And that's been something that I've like really still kind of been butting up against. So, yeah, I'm really glad we're hearing this now because I'm definitely going to be employing that technique as we go forward into the game. I think that could definitely make a bit of a difference. But yeah, thanks, Cody. I'm glad you know things.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Can you also use the shoulder buttons to change between which item you have active? Because that's another pain point for me right now is having to tap so many different places to get an item activated. Or is that still just tap the items, then select the one you want?
I think you can. Use buttons. So because the buttons aren't functionless like the D-pad and stuff. They do have like I think it might be down that brings you to the map screen instantly, and it might be like left that toggles the menu so that you have access to the item screen and stuff. But you should play around with those because the buttons do have functions, just not for moving and attacking. But they do have shortcut functions for things that you can do on the screen, but that it's nice to be able to have a little shortcut for.
Gotcha. I think more investigation is required, Matt.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Cody, you said you had some more notes that you wanted to walk through. So this is your time. Let us know what you had.
So I did have a bit down about the combat, and my note was that this is a very powerful feeling Link in a way, in terms of like your combat range, your control of things like the boomerang and the bow, feel really stable in a way that's like, and just directly in control. You can tap from across the screen and Link will just jump like, long jump Olympic distances to smash them on the head. And I'm enjoying that. I think part of it is also that I've played this game before. I think I get more out of it on a subsequent playthrough because a lot of the annoyances of the game are in getting used to it in the first place. And so I've sort of been it did take me a while to get back into it. Like probably the first dungeon or so, I was still like grumbling a bit about the controls. But by this point, I think I'm at the point where I feel strong while controlling the character. Is I guess what I'll say there. Okay. Aside from dungeon notes and stuff, my other note is just that this is just in the context of the era. We talk about this a lot of how it's similar to Skyward Sword and how it contrasts with the Link Between Worlds. But I think just taking note of why that's the case. Why is it that the DS and Wii Zelda games are like this tutorial heavy, device gimmick heavy? And I think a lot of it has to do with, Max talked about this, I believe, last week, but the wide expansion of the number of people playing video games under this era for Nintendo. Like the difference between the GameCube and the Wii, or the Game Boy Advance, which was still quite popular on its own terms, but nowhere near the DS for the second most popular video game console of all time. This was the era where they were into gimmicks. Like, this was the Wii Sports and Wii Fit and all of this era. And so coming back to it now, I think there's a bit of why is it so gimmicky? But I think in the context of the time, I think it was more understood like, oh, this is a showcase for the system, that's using all the mechanics of the system to show, look, it even has a microphone. It's got this and that. And I don't think that necessarily makes it a better game when you think about it, but I think it does help with understanding some of their decisions.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I really do think that one thing that's interesting about this game is that in my mind, I'm considering it one of the more recent Zelda games just because of where it lines up in the release order, And I mean,
there are people listening to this podcast who were born after the release of Phantom Hourglass.
God, that feels old. Don't you just feel old sometimes?
Yeah, it's
Cody?
like the reality here is that, I mean, we have to remember, like, what year did this come out? 2007, right? So we're definitely squarely in a very transitional period of game design, just generally, right?
Yeah, that was 16 years ago.
Yeah. So that really does bear mentioning as well. And in some ways, it's like we're a little privileged to be fans of the Zelda series because the series can at times feel a little immune from some of the, some of the more sticky fads and conventions of the time. Sometimes they don't, right? Zelda 1 and 2 are good examples of that. But I think maybe this is just an instance of like, it's totally understandable why a thing happened or why it was designed this way, and we just maybe need to keep that a bit more in the back of the mind as much as possible, right? Like, while trying to still be objective about how much.
Yeah. I mean, the same way that you did for Zelda 1, basically, like understanding. All right, well, this was the context of the time. Like, in the modern day, this is annoying. Why isn't there a save function? Why isn't there this? But in the context of the time, Zelda 1 was trying all of these interesting things. Like, here are the things that hadn't been done or that were in the process of being innovated, is always helpful in understanding these games. And because Nintendo is always looking to innovate, and sometimes it works and sometimes it does. Sometimes it ends up being a Wii Sports and sometimes it ends up being a Virtual Boy. But they do always try.
Yeah, they certainly do. No one can take that away from them. Before we move out of part 2 and get into what is going to be undeniably a more positive section of this episode, I want to turn it over to Matt real quick.
Yes, do tell.
And say that several times throughout this episode and in past episodes, the comparison to Skyward Sword has been made. Skyward Sword notably being one of your favorite Zelda games of all time. It's currently, as Cody said before, sits number 3 on our podcast ranking of Zelda titles. Very high up on the list of the 9 games that we played so far. And of course, I love it too. Not quite as much as you, but we both really like it.
I don't think anyone loves it quite as much as me.
So what I would like is for you to tell me, not necessarily whether you think everybody's right about these comparisons, but I want you to go into positive Matt mode for a second.
Sure.
In what ways do you think it is similar and hitting similar, fun qualities, I guess?
Yeah, no, and I actually think that the comparison to Skyward Sword is pretty apt, to be honest. I think that it has 3 striking similarities at its core that are similar to Skyward Sword, and that is a control style gimmick, which of course we know for Skyward Sword was the Wii Motion controls, this one being touch screen controls. It has a consistent lack of a true overworld that is explorable. Skyward Sword, we had a lot of strongly opinionated things to say about the sky in Skyward Sword, and I think this version of the Great Sea shares a lot of those negatives. And I truly do think that this is a story-focused, story-heavy game, which Skyward Sword was as well. And I think so far, I have actually enjoyed the story of this game fairly well enough, I would say. It's a new style of Zelda story. It's kind of a Zelda as a place story instead of a Zelda as an action adventure game. Where, you know, it's a mystery and it's a mystery we're solving. And I like that well enough. So, and I also think another positive in Phantom Hourglass's favor is the 3 dungeons we've played being 3 what you would generally think of as introductory section or section 1, section alpha, whatever of a Zelda game. They've been 3 really strong intro dungeons to this game. I think Skyward Sword had strong dungeons throughout, so I think there are definite parallels to be made here. I think we've already gone into all the negatives and you wanted me to be positive, Matt. So there you go. There are the positive correlations between Phantom Hourglass and Skyward Sword.
Matt, were you serving me up a segue into part 3?
Yes, I was.
I love you for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, for many reasons, that being one of them.
Welcome to part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we talk about this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. This week's dungeon is the Temple of Courage. Let's get into it. So here's what I'll say about this. I think that similar to what Matt was just alluding to, we have got another entry in what is currently a very good lineup of very solid dungeons. I think that the first 3 dungeons of this game have been uniformly, I would even say excellent. Like they've been very fun. I have not gotten bored in these dungeons. I felt like the puzzles, where some things that happen in the overworld and in the exploration and stuff have leveraged some very frustrating decisions in terms of puzzles and secrets and whatnot. I think that the dungeons are actually choosing to focus on some of the things that this game does better. Map notation, stylus controls for both combat and items, there's a lot of things to really like here. So I was very impressed with the Temple of Courage. That's just my baseline thought about it. Cody, how about you? How do you feel generally about the Temple of Courage?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it has that structure where they've got the one thing for you to remember, but then it escalates a little each time. And then by the end, there's a part right before the boss room where you're traveling around on a platform. There's 4 eyes and you've got to shoot them. And then I tried shooting them all once. I thought, I'll just go around and maybe I have to shoot 8 eyes or something, just travel around and find them. Then I realized, oh no, there are 4 eyes. And the reason that they haven't been activated is because I need to follow the rule, which is, up, down, right, left. And then I felt a sense of accomplishment from that being the sort of, third set of, that rule coming into play once again. And so it really felt like a sort of, a single dungeon in a way that's, as opposed to just a series of rooms, it felt like a big puzzle, and I really enjoyed that about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, how about yourself?
No, I agree. I really liked this dungeon. I think that it had an interesting assortment of mechanics, from lots of traps and kind of a maze-like system that you have to progress through, the getting the crystal and moving it from one section to another. All of that was very excellent, and the bow in this game I really, really enjoy. I think probably my favorite puzzle in this dungeon. That's a great thought. I think it's either stuck between the one Cody mentioned, because I did really enjoy the up, down, right, left aspect to the eyes, and also the levers that you have to pull earlier. I didn't like the levers one as much because I died during it, or almost died.
Because those BMOs kind of suck?
Yeah, dude, those BMOs suck. I liked the eye one, and I liked the little devices that shot your arrow in different directions. So in order to hit the switch that changes the blue to red blocks, you know what I mean? You'd shoot your arrow into it. It looks like a glass eyeball with a point coming out of it, and it would redirect your arrow. I thought that was really cool. I liked those.
So I want to kick off something here. This is something that was suggested to us. I think Max maybe brought this up, and something that we actually meant to start doing when we began this game. But that was to actually summarize the dungeon a little bit.
That's probably a good idea.
During part 3, right? Just so people have a bit more sense of place, especially if they are listening and haven't played yet. Although we do encourage you to play before you listen to each episode. The Temple of Courage is a 3-floor, I believe it's a 3-floor dungeon. It has a non-symmetrical layout in terms of theme. It's really just going for island cavern more so than anything else. It doesn't have anything as specific as, lava or ice or anything like that. The 3 floors are fairly compact in terms of at least the top and bottom ones have got a large number of rooms that are very labyrinthine in their structure and layout. There is a floor as well that is a bit more open. It's got moving platforms that go from one area to the next, and that one has a few puzzles that are, much more tailored to a wide open layout. The main mechanics of this dungeon are, 1, the need to shoot different eye-shaped switches with the main item you get in this dungeon, which is the bow and arrow, making a welcome early debut in this game. Sometimes they save it for the back half. Always nicer to get it earlier rather than later. Enemies in this dungeon include the Pole's Voice, notably. We've got some keys. We've got what all do we have in here, Matt? These those bumper enemies. I never know what they're called, but they're the ones that have like the blue circular shell. And in A Link Between Worlds, when you hit these guys, you kind of bounce off of them. In this game, they just kind of bounce away from you, but it's the same enemy. I really don't.
I don't know what they're called either.
Yeah,
helmet beetles. We'll call them helmet beetles.
Something like that. Yeah. Let's see. Spike traps aplenty. We have floor spike spinners that are in here for the first time in this game. Let's see. The boss is a giant crab with the name of, what was the name, Matt?
Carrick or Craic.
Yeah,
my computer died, so I don't know.
Okay, cool. Not exactly sure. Regardless, it is a it is a very solid dungeon, and I actually kind of got a little bit of like a Link's Awakening vibe from it in a few different ways, like layout and theme and all of that.
I enjoy games that will lean into the invisible walkway, like Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. The leap of faith. I think it's a great use of the map drawing mechanic in this game to have the route for that kind of posted up on a wall, and you just have to like draw it, and then you can use it. I really like that. I thought that was excellent.
So what stuff like that is doing, and I enjoyed it as well, what it's really doing is it's incentivizing investigation within dungeons, which I think, like on its face, this dungeon in terms of progression can feel a little linear at times, right? Even though the layout is kind of sprawling, you really are getting kind of funneled from one thing to the next, and there's not a whole lot of room to get lost between those things. Right. However, this element of investigation really does add something extra to it, in that you have got to be checking in with the I don't know if they're Sheikah stones here, but they're a similar thing.
Yeah, they're little boing tablets.
Stones. Yeah, tablets on the wall, maps on the wall. Like, you really do have to be paying attention to a lot of these things, and also updating your map accordingly. And I think that's something that really helps give these dungeons legs. Like it really helps. Excuse me. It really helps you feel invested in the exploration of the dungeon, which is a really great feeling. And I think honestly, it's one of the biggest things that this game brings to the table, and I would say leads to, it creates a newness to the dungeon experience that I sometimes don't get out of 2D Zelda games. I think that so far, again, we talked about this last week, but dungeons in this game to me feel like a direct refute of dungeons in A Link Between Worlds, and the reasons that we didn't enjoy those as much. So
I totally agree on that point. And I think that while these dungeons still don't have mini bosses, which I still miss. I really miss mini bosses. I love mini boss fights. Just the simple, and this was something we debated a lot in A Link Between the Worlds, is getting the item prior to going into the dungeon via a Ravio-like system a good thing or a bad thing? And I think with this being the direct next game that we're playing, I think we have to come away and say that it's a bad thing for the dungeon experience, because even though these dungeons aren't necessarily super long, they feel much more like a traditional, well-structured dungeon experience in a way that we always felt A Link Between Worlds was 80% of a dungeon. And it's just the getting the item that opens up the next half to 3/4 of the more advanced dungeon diving experience. And that is so hugely positive.
Cody, I mean, do you think, so you didn't have a chance, obviously, like we spoke about dungeons while we were actually playing through A Link Between Worlds, but you haven't had a chance to weigh in on this whole discussion of directly juxtaposing dungeons in this game versus ones in A Link Between Worlds. I mean, do you feel like we're kind of on a valid thread here? Do you think that these dungeons are kind of bringing something to the table that is just a little bit more intensive and of an experience than what we got in A Link Between Worlds, or maybe even some of the other top-down Zelda games?
Yeah, I think I think there are different styles that have their different advantages. Like, I think in the same way that this is a predecessor to games like Skyward Sword, where some of this stuff got done better, A Link Between Worlds was a predecessor to Breath of the Wild in terms of exploring, like, because what I think of the Ravio dungeon item system is a predecessor to the Breath of the Wild abilities. Like, the idea of, what if you just had a permanent set of abilities and you solved all dungeons with that set of abilities, is the driving force behind Breath of the Wild and also A Link Between Worlds. But A Link Between Worlds, they were trying that with an earlier system that was like, well, what if we can, the items it's traditional items and they're all available, but you can rent them out. Whereas Breath of the Wild went one step further and said, let's forget about traditional items completely. We don't even have a hook shot. You've got a couple of things like a bow and bombs, but, you're not getting the range of items that you do in traditional games. And I think that that approach is not necessarily a worse approach. I do think A Link Between Worlds was an earlier iteration on it, but I think Tears of the Kingdom shows us that the ultimate iteration of that no items in a dungeon kind of idea led to a world where there are a few core abilities that just completely shaped the entire world of Zelda. And I think that's interesting too. But I guess, just getting back to Phantom Hourglass specifically, I think it has some of the better dungeons in handheld Zelda games. I think what it's probably missing Phantom Hourglass dungeons so far is just aesthetic. I think Max also mentioned this, but like, what really made Skyward Sword stand out with dungeons was stuff like the Sand Ship and the Ancient Cistern, where you're like, this isn't just a series of red rooms. This is like a ancient device that you're bringing back to life or something like that. And it doesn't really have that level of like this as a space, but like in terms of the actual puzzles, I think, I think it's a really good version of top-down Zelda puzzles.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but
no. I think that that's correct, and I do think that was kind of relevant to what we were asking. I have a question for you specifically, Cody. I'm looking at the map layout of this dungeon, and it's something that I was thinking while I was actually playing through this as well. From just an arrangement standpoint, this dungeon reminds me of something that is definitely not the way that The Legend of Zelda typically arranges their dungeons. And I'm curious if you know what it is. I have it in my mind. I'm like, oh, this is laid out very similarly to this kind of thing. But I'm curious if you want to take a stab at it.
Let's see. What are Lyndon's other hobbies?
There are many.
I mean, it's I might say Metroid or something, but that's, I guess, in some ways what Zelda also is.
So these screens to me are laid out the same way that cave systems are in Pokemon games. Where where it's all like the arrangement of things is kind of scattershot, right? Like it's all a little all over the place. Like you have a sense of some kind of claustrophobia of exploration while you're exploring it, but just like the way that like lots of corners and twists and turns and, stairs that lead up to other levels and then back down to other levels. And obviously Zelda has those things a lot of the time, but there's usually like an element, there's usually a much more intentional element of symmetry, or at least of layout to dungeons and Zelda games. Even going as far back as the original Legend of Zelda, where the map layouts were intended to be like portraying the things that the dungeons were themed after, right? And I think that it's very essential that nobody kind of hear me make that observation and say that I'm seeing it as a negative. I really don't think that. I'm pretty neutral on this, but I do think it is very interesting. I think that it's a much less intentional feeling. And I guess intentional is not even the right word, because the layout of the dungeon is very intentional, right? Like they have the whole thing plotted out and it works exactly the way that it should. Like it makes sense as you're moving through it. It's just, it doesn't have quite that next level of like, okay, we have that intentional layout and now we've paired that with, something thematic or something that feels more functional as a space. And I know I said a little bit of that last week, but I think that this dungeon really kind of goes even a step or two further in that kind of school of thought.
Yeah, I can definitely see the comparisons. You're not being attacked by Zubat that keep using supersonic on you, so it's better than a dungeon or a cave in a Pokemon game. Not to mention self-destruct, just, with Geodudes and that just run around using self-destruct. It's a disaster.
Can't deal with it. Yep.
Yeah, but it is a different approach when you're looking at it as one. I mean, there's a couple of flaws, but in a way it's a one big room, as opposed to, you've got partitions and stuff that will let you through certain areas, but earlier Zelda games were much more separate rooms that are just like the same size, like here's a room the size of a Game Boy screen, and you open the room, the enemies will jump out, you'll get a key, you'll move on to the next room. Whereas I think some of the stuff you see in this and in A Link Between Worlds is you see different approaches to how you can do it if you don't have to load in again each time. Like, you can just have a bigger sort of a bigger layout to a single floor.
Yeah, absolutely. If both of y'all are okay with this, I would like to move on to a discussion about the dungeon's main item and then go talk about the boss for a little bit. That sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So main item in this dungeon is the bow and arrow. We've already mentioned that we really enjoy the way that it controls in this game. Matt, would you say that this is actually maybe one of the most satisfying to use examples of the bow and arrow in a Zelda game?
I would say it is top 3. Yeah, probably. Yeah. I enjoy that quite a lot. The simple mechanic of tap on the screen and the arrow is going to go to that point and continue on in infinity is pretty cool. Yeah.
I mean, you implied a ranking, so here's where you kind of have to.
Oh, I mean, I don't actually have like a ranking off the top of my head, but like
number 1 is Ocarina of Time: Majora's Mask,
obviously, because it's just a sniper.
Rifle.
Yeah, it's just a sniper. I actually really like Skyward Sword's bow. I thought the HD version where you're not aiming with the motion controls. I think it has a satisfying amount of realistic drop off that you can use to feel like a real bow. So it's kind of the inverse of why the sniper rifle is great, where it doesn't feel like a real bow in any way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom bows feel very satisfying as well. But
sure.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of, those are the top 4-ish.
Yeah. How about you, Cody? How do you feel about this iteration of a very classic Zelda item?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's quite good, and it also sort of differentiates itself from like the boomerang, for example, in ways that in a lot of handheld games, the boomerang and the bow are quite similar. I mean, one stuns enemies and one kills them, and one's infinite use and one's not. But like you sort of activate them the same way. Whereas this game, they both feel distinct in a way that's like, the boomerang is still incredibly useful for, various things in a way that's different from the bow. And then when I activate the bow, I feel strong, because, you're standing still, you've centered yourself, and you've got a great accuracy, in a way that like a lot of bow stuff has been fiddly in the past with just like, getting to actually go where you want it to go. But
well, to that point, I actually think in a lot of 3D games too, I mean, even though the way that you activate and use the 2 items is different, I can think of a few examples of in a 3D Zelda game, you get the boomerang early and it's fine, and then you get the bow and you never use the boomerang again, right? Yeah. And I think in this game, they both have very different and equally valid use cases, which is really nice. I mean, just having no wasted items is always a good feeling.
Oh yeah, like because that was the problem with so the game directly before Phantom Hourglass is one that we haven't actually mentioned at all. Nobody's been talking about it, but Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
So that's the context for this game being the one after that. And Twilight Princess had its strengths with dungeons and stuff as well, but it did have a notable problem where the items were a lot of the items felt meaningless as soon as you exited the dungeon that it was intended for, or like you got like a slingshot that was just made completely irrelevant by the time you get the bow early on. For example, and it felt in that game like, all right, well, you've got these items because that's what they did in Ocarina of Time, which you're trying to copy, but like mostly it's just lugging around an inventory of, very specific use stuff. Whereas it feels like in this game, each of the 3 items we've gotten from the 3 dungeons are incredibly valuable in their own right, and I'll continue using them all for their own purposes. So I think in that way, the use of the items here is a big step up from the previous game in the series.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm curious to see if this kind of holds out. I don't actually know. Again, it's startling to me how little I know about the later stages of this game. It's really not much at all. And so I'm not sure what items we get in the future. I don't know if we have a hookshot coming our way or, other stuff. I do feel like I know we get fire and ice arrows in this game. That might not even be right. But I'm curious to know if this feeling of like, yes, everything has its place and its specific use, and there's room for all of it for the entirety of the game. I'm very interested to know if that continues, and I would be delighted, honestly, if it was. So I would like now to move on to talk about the boss fight before we get out of part 3. This is the part where I'm actually going to go and Google what this dude's name is. Hold on one second. Temple of Courage boss. There we go. Zelda Dungeon says that the name of this boss is Crake. It's like It's like
Crayk.
Yeah, it's like if you spelled crayon, but after the Y, you just had a K. It's Crake. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Of course, Crake has a secondary title, which is Crake, the Bane of Courage.
Which sounds way cooler.
Which sounds pretty badass. I'm curious what this crazy crab monster did to deserve that moniker. This was another in a series of pretty impressive boss fights, I thought. Fun in a very unique way. Not quite as unique as the boss in the last dungeon with the cyclones and the bombs and everything. But what we had here was another really excellent use of the dual screen system, right? Where you were controlling Link as normal on the bottom screen. And on the top screen, you're watching the boss's point of view as it's stalking you. That's pretty stinking cool. Like, I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I would say that whereas I felt like the closing the 3DS screen was a gimmicky bad use of a technologically pretty cool feature, the use of the dual screen that the 3DS or originally the DS had continues to be in these boss fights just a really cool, innovative and effective new thing. And it doesn't feel gimmicky. It feels impressive and it feels unique and satisfying. I really, really liked and it was different than the last time we had it, right? Like it's not like they're doing the same thing every time. Last time it was you just had a wider POV so that you could see where the boss was overhead, and now it is you're literally in the boss's perspective. So like really, really cool, really fun use of a unique feature that the DS and 3DS have.
You know what I really like in any Zelda game, Matt?
Tell me.
A boss that requires me to use multiple items to beat it and not just the one that I get in the dungeon.
Yep. Totally agree.
So this boss fight, and I'm not sure if I did it exactly the right way, but once you break Crabman's shell, you have to stun its tail in order to get around it and then like hit it with your sword, you know?
Yeah.
I was finding that he was moving too aggressively. I guess so. I was finding that the boss was moving too aggressively forward at all points for me to actually get around it and hit it with its sword. So what I was doing instead was popping out the boomerang, floating it around, hitting the tail. That would stun the boss for a few seconds, and then I could go in for some sword swipes. But I'm curious to know what your experience was like, Cody.
So for me, what I did is I tried to shoot at it with an arrow. It blocks with its claws, and then that block position holds for like 3 seconds, so you have time to get around and hit it with your sword.
Okay.
That's what I did as well.
I mean, your approach also works, but the boomerang is under sort of a crab is running at me situations. I'd prefer to just have a bow that I can just shoot directly at it rather than trying to fiddle around with the boomerang. But I think both would work.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right about that, and it's good to know that it's kind of an equivalent situation no matter which solution you try to go with. I think in my head I was kind of stuck behind the whole like, well, this creature has an armored front, and I've got to find some way to get around that armor in order to do damage, because that's the kind of thing that Zelda games do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that's why my mind just immediately went to Boomerang, and especially after fighting the Zoras earlier in this chunk, right? Where, you got to use the Boomerang to get around their shield, and then you can stun them, and then you can do damage. So I think that's kind of where my mind was at. In fairness, it seems like I maybe gave up on trying to figure out a way to solve the situation with the bow, maybe just a little bit too quickly. But hey, it worked. I beat it.
Yes, you did, Lyndon.
It was effective, and I knew what was happening in the fight.
You did so good.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing as Cody. And actually you can even just use your sword to swipe at its face and it'll still do the same block thing. So I just did, cause I was running pretty low on arrows. So I just did like a sword swipe at its face and then moved around to the back and with the sword on its tail. So, I think this boss fight was great, all the way through.
Oh, yeah.
I also really I love it when boss fights have trash mobs or ads that are scuttling around in the arena. That always adds like an extra level of complexity and combat mechanic that I enjoyed. And
one thing we frequently mention that we wish was happening with bosses in, again, A Link Between Worlds, which, man, I really feel like A Link Between Worlds is catching an unfair amount of flack in this season of the show, just because of like our recency to having played it.
Yep.
We really liked that game, I promise, but yeah.
Yeah. The boss fights in Link Between Worlds weren't notoriously difficult or memorable, and these ones are both. Sorry, Cody, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that's the thing. A Link Between Worlds has opposite strengths to this game. Like, this game has a really great, like, consistent sort of traditional dungeons, traditional bosses, except, with a bit of a tweak to them, that are quite good. But it's a nightmare to get around all the little gimmicks where it's telling you, hey, yell at this man, or whatever. Whereas A Link Between Worlds is just the smoothest Zelda game you'll ever play. But it also is sort of a, the dungeons are also smooth. And you can see here that there's some, the dungeons here are, I think, quite good. But the problems that people have with Phantom Hourglass are just sort of the general around the edges roughness of just, random gimmicks and things that they maybe didn't need to put in there. So I think the comparison between the two styles for a handheld Zelda game do make sense. So, in terms of this actual boss, I think this is another one where this is something that could only have been done on a dual screen setup. Like having the sort of the stalker survival horror vision of like, here's the predator vision of like when it's seeing you happening on the top screen. And then because it's invisible and running around and you have to figure out, where it is to shoot it. That's like a really cool element that only really makes sense if you've got two screens to spare.
I think the only time we've seen something similar to this in Zelda before is in like the opening cutscenes to bosses, right? Where they'll be like, they'll be stalking Link from wherever they're hiding in the room when you walk in.
Right, like when there's a Goma hiding in the ceiling or that kind of thing, you get sort of a little cutscene of like, it sees you, but you don't see it yet. But not during the actual. You don't see from its vision during an actual gameplay segment because you need to be able to see from your vision. And so. Yeah, it's really just all three bosses so far have done interesting things with the top screen. The second boss was making it a vertical fight where you're sending bombs upwards. The first boss, I know YouTube brute forced it, but the first boss's gimmick is that it tells you on the top screen which order to hit them in, and so. I really enjoyed the bosses each time in this. And just a note on the name, Craig, this is around the era where in every region, including like Japan and then, the English release and then other languages, there's just a different name for everything. So this, in Japan, this boss is named... Well, the translation is Gigantic Crustacean Rayard. So,
well, there you go.
It's got a title the way that you see in like in Ocarina of Time and games like that, where there's just a little a title as well as the boss.
Where it's like Abominable Arachnid Queen Goma,
yeah, and then in Italian it's Crustula, the King of Courage.
The King of Courage.
And then in Spanish, in European Spanish, it's Crustanos. And then in Latin American Spanish, it's Crake, Ruler of Rage. And there's so each language just makes its own, because they're all based on, because crake is sort of like a crayfish kind of, like it's all based on like the crustacean, crayfish, crab, kind of wording puns, but like it's a different, just each regional variation just made their own localization, which is something you'll see around this era. There's one character in Spirit Tracks who's a recurring character who I have, my just Australian release has a different name for him than the American release, because the European and American translations just gave them different names.
We don't want to know the answer to that.
Which is so odd, especially between like English language versions of these games. It's very strange that they would diversify in that way. But anyway, can't wait to find out which character that is.
Names facts.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I like that it is called the Bane of Courage or whatever it was. Lyndon, what was it?
I think it was Bane of Courage. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That felt fun.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about this dungeon before we move out of part 3? I feel like we've canvassed most of it pretty well, but
yeah, no, I'm good.
Cody, you good?
Yep, I'm good. Yep.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about fascinating things that diverted our attention this week. I actually have one this week in like a sharp juxtaposition from last week.
Well, then you go for it, because I don't.
Where we had mostly nothing. And this is kind of a cheat, because acquiring the salvage arm is required to beat this section of the game. However, once I had the salvage arm and I had the sun key, I then went and spent some time using it on some of the X marks that you get on your map, where you can just pull up rupees and other things.
Yep.
And so I spent a little bit of time doing that, and I think where I land on the salvage arm as a mechanic is that I think it's actually kind of a fun minigame. When it goes wrong, it's frustrating, but I think like on paper for what it is, I think that I enjoy it well enough. It's far from the least frustrating Zelda minigame that I've ever played. I like it far more than baseball, for instance. Right?
Low bar.
Sure. But I do think it's fine. I think it's fun. I think the rewards are suitably, like for as much time as it takes you to kind of make it through one of these, they feel appropriate, right? Like getting more dust in your Phantom Hourglass, right? Like that's a pretty big deal, So that was kind of my main thing there. I didn't really get up to too much extra this week. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm just not finding the things that you're supposed to be spending extra time on. The minigame, the canon minigame on the crap. What's the name of this island?
Is it the Sploosh Kaboom guy?
Yeah, it's Sploosh Kaboom guy, but he's got a new gig. It's Salvatore.
Yeah.
And I forget what the name of this island is, but anyway, doing Salvatore's actually his nautical take on the Gerudo horseback riding arrow shooting minigame from Ocarina of Time, a very similar sort of thing. So I enjoyed doing that for a little bit, but yeah, so it's a pretty minigame heavy little section of Bloopy Trails for me, but I thought they were both fun.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of salvaging, not a lot. I did in this week's section board one of the traveler's ships, which you can find just around. So the one I boarded was down by Melita Island. So I did that, which I guess you could probably qualify as a Bloopy Trail. Pretty neat.
Interesting. So, I actually visited 2 traveler ships this week, met 2 different characters, and I was kind of intentionally not talking about it because I actually have a few different options for my Z targeting pick this week that I'm going to, pick at the last minute depending on what everybody else goes with. But one of the denizens of these traveler ships, was very amusing to me. And it was a really fun thing to stumble across. But I'm not going to talk about that just yet.
Fair enough.
How about you, Cody? Do you have any Z targeting picks or sorry, wrong
Any
section.
Bloopy Trails?
Yeah, do you have any Bloopy Trails that stood out to you, things that were fun to follow up on this week?
Yeah, I had a few things actually. So the treasure shop opened on the main island. I don't know if you visited it.
I've been to the general. It's like a general store on Merkay Island. They had that's where I bought my shield. You can get red potion there. You can get a one of those beads of courage or power or whatever.
So not a shop. I'm talking about the treasure shop, which is where your random Zora scales and pearl necklaces and all of this are sold for cash.
Okay. No, I have not been there yet.
Okay. So there was some stuff I had in my inventory that was worth like 800 rupees. And so I sold a whole bunch of stuff. I felt rich. I went around and bought a couple of heart containers and things. And so that was a fun time. I think there's a few things. I know that the main island looked pretty empty at first, but like some of the stuff is gradually opening up over time. So you should definitely check that one out because you're probably sitting on like 2,000 rupees worth of stuff from your salvaging that you could be turning into money. So that's one Bloopy Trail. The other one is I found an uncharted island that has no map when you walk across it, so you sort of have to note things down yourself. I solved a little puzzle on the uncharted island, and I unlocked the ability to fast travel. So that's
okay.
a pretty major. So that's what these frogs are about. I don't know if you have run across these frogs that you can shoot with your cannon, and then if you shoot them, they're like, "Why'd you shoot me with the cannon?" But the point of those is that once you talk to the big frog, Silos the big frog, on this island, those frogs can start revealing to you sort of cyclone fast travel locations.
Gotcha. Okay. I have indeed been wondering what that's all about because I've hit several of them and felt like I got nothing meaningful for my trouble. So glad to know that there is something tied to that, and I will be on the lookout for that uncharted island. That should incentivize me to do a little bit more exploration on the open sea than I've been doing up until this point.
Yeah, it's like this is a big step back from the Wind Waker in terms of open exploration, but it's not quite at Skyward Sword levels of no overworld yet. Like there are actual just full-on islands that just are not on the map that have, here's where you upgrade, here's where you're going to upgrade your sword, or here's where you're going to unlock fast travel and that sort of thing. Like they are just hanging around if you just explore openly rather than just going one destination to another. It's not a perfect overworld, but there is still overworld stuff in there in this game.
Well, I've tucked that away for future reference, and I will definitely be on the lookout. Let's get into part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happened across. Matt, I'm gonna let you go first.
You know what? I'm going to go with an enemy. I'm going to go with the giant eyeball spawn creature that tried to prevent us from Melita Island. I don't know where his body is. I want to know where his body is. I want to know what his deal is. I want to know why he's at Melita Island. And I want to know, did he perish when we blew him up? Because I don't know. He's just kind of an interesting little guy who, for no reason whatsoever, blocked us from entering Melita Island.
Yeah, I was looking at that kind of as similar to the giant octo battles in Wind Waker, right? I guess I was just kind of assuming that we would be meeting more of this creature later down the road. I don't know if that's actually true, but I was taking it on similar terms to that. So, but yeah, I definitely agree. I think it is kind of interesting that they didn't just reuse the giant octo.
Yeah, right? Like that would have been kind of neat.
But I definitely think this creature looks fun and interesting and has cool design. And the fight didn't annoy me. I don't know if I want to say that I loved it or anything, but
I found myself just drawing a very long series of circling paths, just up and down and up and down and up and down, and just shooting incessantly until it finally worked. So, but yeah, I mean, it was fine.
Okay, good pick. How about you, Cody? You got a Z targeting for us?
Yeah, well, my Z targeting was actually Silos the Big Frog, but it turns out that neither of you have met him, but that's okay. You'll meet him next week if you do a bit of exploring around. But it's good to get involved in frog business, as they say. And start unlocking a few of the secrets of the world, etc. So yeah, that's my Z targeting pick.
Okay, excellent. Neither of you all picked the character that I was very excited to talk about, which is the resident of one of those traveler ships that you were just talking about, Matt. I was unclear on whether or not I missed this guy's name, so I had to go check the old wikis to see. And it appears that this guy's name is literally just self-proclaimed hero. I wonder if you met this guy, Matt.
Well, was he on the traveler ship down by Melita Island, or was he on a different one?
He was on one up in the Northwestern Sea.
Then I have not met this guy.
So
he's the swordsman with the crows.
Yes, I can't remember if he had a crow or not. He's the one who lives on an exact replica of the King of Red Lions. So,
that's cool.
So you go up there and you board this ship. As you get close to it, you start realizing, hey, this thing looks a little familiar, but also just a little janky, a little different in some certain specific ways. So you board this ship, and this guy this is how he's dressed, Matt.
Oh, what a poser.
So he's wearing what is very clearly Link's outfit that we had at home, right?
Yeah.
And is very keen to tell you how big of a hero he is. He's been on a lot of adventures. He saved the world, in fact, aboard his ship, which has the majestic name of the Prince of Red Lions. That's what his ship is called.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So he invites you to train with him in the ways of the sword. He doesn't actually have a sword. He has like a...
Yeah, he looks like he has a pitchfork.
He has some kind of spiky pitchfork thing. But anyway, he invites you to train with him. And anyway, after getting in exactly 2 hits, he kind of crumples into a corner and says that he thinks that he is just not worth our time, and that a swordsman of his stature has nothing that he could potentially pass on to us. We're just too far below his level of excellence.
Yes. Yeah. The
So,
classic, I'm too good for this.
Yeah.
Even though you just whooped my booty.
Yeah, which is kind of actually a similar thing to what Linebeck has going on, right?
Yes.
But anyway, so this guy is obviously pretty goofy looking. He looks like off-brand Link if Link had a huge old like goatee. And
red hair.
Red hair. It was kind of derpy looking. He has a pom-pom on the back of his green hat. So the outfit is just really spectacular. Anyway, I just got a reel. Anyway, I was really tickled over this whole interaction. As soon as I saw it, I was just kind of thinking to myself like, oh, for a second there, I was wondering like, hey, did I just stumble upon like what's left of the King of Red Lions? And I guess maybe I did. I don't know. Like, I don't know where this guy got this boat that looks weirdly similar to ours from the last game. But
horrible.
Yeah. But anyway, it was a fun little interaction, and I can't wait until you get to meet him, Matt.
I'm very excited. I'm going to go search him out.
Yeah. He's a big old liar, pants on fire. He didn't save anyone from anything.
Nope. Never did a decent thing in his life.
There you go. So that's my Z targeting pick for this week. That brings us into part 6, which is final thoughts, where we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do. Matt, take it away.
So this section of the game continues our journey as we make it back through the Temple of the Ocean King and frustrating series of events and rehashing things that we've done, back to exploring the open ocean after an equally frustrating mechanic of finding our next clue. We get to engage with the salvage arm, which is a fun mini game, and head back to Melita Island with an interesting-ish mini boss fight, which gets us into a really fantastic dungeon, with a continued theme of well-crafted, unique dungeons and even more uniquely crafted and thoughtful, exciting boss fights. We get one of our favorite items in the bow and capture the supposedly the Spirit of Courage, who is interestingly mute. So another mystery to solve in this game of Zelda mysteries. So very exciting overall, specifically the back 3/4. Could do without the front quarter, but the back 3/4 of this section of game were excellent.
Well done, as always, Matt. Normally, this would be the end of the Sacred Realms rundown. However, it's a Cody Davies episode, so this is the point in the episode where I say to you, Cody, what you got for us?
All right, so part 7, Cody's tips. I do want to reiterate, shoulder buttons for items will be a big help for you if there's a time sensitive thing in terms of like you're trying to react while you're fighting an enemy or something. Being able to just hold the shoulder buttons and then the item stays active for as long as you hold it and then it deactivates when you let go is a big help. Part 8. Do you two know what part 8 is?
This is not Australia Facts, is it?
This is why does Matt intentionally pronounce everything wrong?
Is that the one?
No, this is Australia Facts.
Oh, Australia Facts. Yay!
Right.
Actually, you were wrong because you said it wasn't Australia Facts.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, Australia Facts is a very important part of each episode, I think.
Essential.
And so I have a fact sheet here from the Australian Coroner Association about animal-related deaths in Australia. So
already a good start. Please continue.
Because people always talk about, here's the, so many deadly animals and stuff in Australia. So what are the actual statistics? Who are the deadliest animals? So between 2001 and 2017, which is just the period that they had stats for here, there were 541 animal-related deaths. So an average of about 32 per year deaths from animals. The number one death-causing animal responsible for nearly a third of animal-related deaths in Australia. I'll give you a chance to guess. What do you think it is?
Well, I was going to say spider, but I feel like that's probably what everybody would guess.
I'm going to go with kangaroo.
You know what? I'm going to say it's a caribou.
Caribou.
Or some kind of bovine critter.
Well, funnily enough, the deadliest animal in America is the deer, by the way.
Yes, that's why I guessed kangaroo.
Yeah. But the deadliest animal in Australia is the horse. Mostly related to falling off of them.
So that tracks.
When trail rides go wrong, am I right?
Yeah, so that's 18 deaths of jockeys during racing events. Out of the 172 deaths, 62% fall related. So 11 fatal incidents that occurred during equestrian events such as rodeo and such. So that's horses. As you would expect, there's a lot of horse-related activity in Australia. So it's not that horses are necessarily, on average deadly, but if a lot of people are involved with horses, then the horse-related accidents become high. So
or people doing dangerous things on horses, right? So you used rodeo. Yeah, you use rodeo as an example, right? Bucking bronco type events. That is a notably quick way to gain serious injuries.
Right. so horse racing, rodeo, show jumping, these kinds of things where you are traveling on top of a horse at high speed, making it do jumps and stuff. There's going to be accidents and stuff. So the next highest killer responsible for 15% of animal-related deaths is the cow. So
hey, I was close. I guess bovine critters. So
so bovine critters are in second place. I'm talking about cows, bulls, other bovine animals just as a group. Because horses was also a group that included like ponies, donkeys, just as a category. So so either it's being knocked over or whatever, or half of it's basically just about car accidents, because that's what kills most deaths to animals in both Australia and America are about car accidents, because when you are traveling at a high speed and something jumps onto the road, that's bad. So as you can see, notably so far there has been zero representation from any of the ones that you would expect.
Yeah, zero uniquely Australian animals.
Yeah, venomous spiders, snakes,
crocodiles.
No kangaroos who punched somebody to death.
Yeah, no, they're in here, but third place in terms of deaths. I'll give you another chance to guess.
Is it any of the ones that we've guessed so far?
No.
Ooh.
Is it koala bears?
No, they don't kill anybody.
To be killed by a koala bear, you would have to try very hard because they're very lazy and they sleep 20 hours a day.
I'm going to go with whatever that's the super toxic octopus.
I was going to say marine life of some kind. I don't know if you have like, lionfish or...
What's the super, world's most poisonous octopus? It's like a blue spotted, it's a little tiny thing.
That would be the blue octorok.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Blue octorok. No, I think the box jellyfish or whatever it's called is deadliest in terms of its actual venom content, but it's not on that's separate to the list of, because the most common deaths are about animals that are constantly near you rather than ones that are, there are a few deaths from so sharks, by the way, there were 27 deaths out of the 550 were sharks. And so that is marine life in that sense. And crocodiles are another 21. And so it is true that water related stuff is dangerous. But they're just less likely to happen because you're less likely to be in the ocean than you are to be on a road, like at any point during the day, just in terms of time spent. Number 3. Oh, hold on. Is this still operating?
Yeah, you sound great.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, cool. It just gave me a little thing about it reconnecting or something, so just wanted to make sure. Okay. So number 3 is, in fact, men's best friends, dogs.
That was going to be my next guess. Yeah.
Mostly either the under 15-year-olds, from biting and stuff, and then over 65-year-olds, which is more from falling and, that sort of thing.
Like falling while walking or something?
Well, like falling because
Tripping
a dog jumped at you.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And you're over 65 years old. Yeah. And next up, you'll be excited to hear this one. Some exciting death statistics for you. 37 deaths attributed to kangaroos.
Yes.
Well, because they actually have a lot of force behind that kick, right? I mean, they They actually can kind of mess you up if they get really angry.
None of the deaths were a result of boxing with the kangaroos. They were all a result of car accidents.
Yeah, I was about to say. I've heard from some other Australians I have met in travels that kangaroos are most dangerous when they're on the road like a deer.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You're traveling through a country road. Suddenly, hopping in front of you is a giant animal. You're either going to hit the animal or you're going to swerve in panic and not hit the animal but still injure yourself. And in half of those incidents also, the person was a motorcyclist, which means that they had even less sort of less protection or less. The weight ratio was different. And so equal to kangaroos, 37 deaths. It's snakes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that tracks.
And what is the predominant species of deadly snake in Australia?
It doesn't tell me here which snakes were involved particularly. It says 37 snake-related deaths, of which 35 were known to involve a venomous snake.
I guess were the rest pythons, maybe?
So I don't know what happened with the other two. I mean, there are it could be car accidents again. Like if you were driving on the highway and a snake dropped out of your, dropped onto your lap or something. Even if it was not venomous, it may cause you to have an accident. That's snakes. And then next up, 31 deaths is bees. That's
definitely car accident related and allergies. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have a bee flying around in your car, not great.
Yeah, people who have bee allergies have serious bee allergies, so it does happen. But yeah, and after that are the sharks and crocodiles. There have been no spider-related deaths since the invention of antivenom. So I don't think there have been any deaths from spiders in the last 40 years or so.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So my big takeaway from this section is that you don't have Shelob running loose around Australia the way that some people would imply is the case, just killing people left and right.
Well, that's the thing is. So, firstly, 99% of people in Australia live in a city, and all of the major cities are on the coast of Australia, and 1% of people live in the 95% geographically of Australia in the middle where the desert is, because it's a desert and they don't have water, and so they don't live there. But that's also where all of the famous poisonous snakes and stuff are. So it's sort of like the animals are there, but you're there's no reason for a person to be out where those animals are, because they're all living near the coast in a city or in a country area surrounding a city. But they're not just there are people out there, but it's not a high percentage of people who are out in the desert just living with the poisonous spiders and stuff.
Makes sense. I'm sad to have that particular bubble popped for me, but knowledge is power, and I feel like you have armed us with knowledge. Yeah, it's it's what gets brought up when you talk about Australia. It's the animals are dangerous there, and it's Steve Irwin had, he was out there in the bush grabbing snakes by the neck and being like, "You beauty," but the average Australian has never done that in their life. And so it's not a whole country of Steve Irwins. This is news to me. Everyone's not just being like, "Oh, crikey, it's a crocodile. I'm going to jump on it."
Well, that's probably for the best.
And so, most deaths are related to just, domestic mammals, horses and cows and stuff, dogs that cause car accidents and all that kind of thing. So yeah, there are some shark and crocodile deaths and stuff, but it's like in the range of 1 to 2 people per year. So yeah, that's my Australia facts for this week. Feel free to visit Australia. If you're not doing rodeo on a horse, then you're not likely to be killed by an animal in Australia.
Y'all should put that on the travel brochures. Like, visit Australia. Great unless you're on a horse.
So, we're gonna move now to part 12. Do you know which one this is?
This has got to be the Matt mispronouncing things deal, right? I mean, he has to have mispronounced something since the last time we did this.
Oh, most definitely.
Look, he has, but I decided to not get into an argument about it.
Yes.
Okay. Let me briefly go back to part 9. Matt, why do you intentionally mispronounce a character's name in each game? To bring up this discourse that we had in the Discord about the name Zora Warrior. I don't know if you were reading this, but Zora Warrior is not the official name of those enemies that we fought in the game. The ones where there were 2 of them.
Yeah, they were called like something with a G that looked very hard to pronounce, and so I chose not to try to pronounce that because I knew I'd get it wrong. So I just went with, I think we ended up agreeing that while the proper name may not be Zora Warrior, they were at least most likely related to the Zora race in some way. So I just chose to go with that.
Yeah, so the enemy is called a Geozard. And, like Geo and Lizard, I guess. And the reason that it's called that on the official wiki, but it's called Zora Warrior in guides and stuff that you'll read, is because the Prima official guide called them Zora Warriors. And so that was the name that was gone with by default when we didn't have a better name. But in the Legend of Zelda Encyclopedia book, they're given an official name, and so that's the version that's used on the wiki. But Zora Warriors is still fine. It's not contradicted. The encyclopedia doesn't say that they're not Zora Warriors. It just gives them a name. So that's the kind of thing that we have to sort out on the wikis, is like when you've got 2 separate, when the encyclopedia says it's called one thing and the Prima guide says it's called another thing, who do you prioritize and then name the wiki page after? So yeah, that was that discussion. But I just went with Zora Warrior during this episode too, because it's like a clear people understand what you're talking about when you say it. So
it's good shorthand for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So part 12 is called "Wow, the Water Dragon in Skyward Sword doesn't know what she's doing."
Our notable favorite section of the Sacred Realms rundown.
The best one.
Yeah.
And in this one, I want to highlight these goddesses that flooded Hyrule apparently didn't just flood Hyrule. Like, we're meant to have moved beyond the boundaries of the previous game, and these people are still flooded. So it's like, what did they do? What did they do wrong? That the goddesses, were like, oh, we'll also flood the neighboring kingdoms. It's just messy.
So the water dragon couldn't keep it locked into Hyrule. She also had to take down, Termina, Holodrum, Labrina, all those other places. They were fine. They were doing good. Never did a thing wrong. Water dragon came for them.
Yeah. So
terrible water dragon.
Yeah. So since I'll be back on next week, I'll move on now to just my part 17. Visit ZeldaUniverse.net and also ZeldaMaps.com. We're regularly doing stuff. There's always more to catalog when it comes to Tears of the Kingdom, but we're getting there. So yeah, that's it for my parts for this week.
This was a positively svelte Sacred Realms rundown for you, Cody. I mean, in fairness, we did spend a fair amount of time on the lethal animals of Australia, right? But
that one feels important.
I think that was important to talk about.
I thought, all right, there's a couple of these parts that I will, I'll leave for next time since I'm doing 2 weeks in a row. But I wanted to have a big bulky Australia facts segment this time around.
I feel like we were really cutting to the meat of what Australia is to us, and that was important. That was time well spent. So thanks for showing up prepared for that, Cody. Of course, as Cody said, Zelda Universe, ZeldaMaps.com. Those are all great places to be. Cody, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where you personally can be found on social media if people would like to go and do that.
Yes. So you can find me on Twitter at Magicody. I have locked in usernames on other platforms. I have a Threads account now. I'm just sort of getting my usernames on there, and if these platforms do take off, then I'll do something with them. But I'm still waiting to see at the moment which of the Twitter successors will or will not take off, because there's about 3 of them at the moment that are major, and Twitter's still going too. So, but they're all trying to take little bits of Twitter's meal. So we'll see how it goes. But at the moment, you can find me on Twitter.
Threads is looking pretty okay, and this seems like a pretty good time to mention that Sacred Realms is active on Threads as well. So if you have moved over there, then we're giving it a shot. We got that entire baked-in network that we already had from Instagram, which is, I think, the reason that most people are probably using it. So check us out on Threads, and also find Cody at all those places that he just mentioned. Matt and Cody, this has been a fantastic episode. Look, obviously a little grim in the front half. All cards on the table. I have not started playing this next episode's chunk of game yet, and I'm really hoping that things start moving up from here. I'm hoping that the nasty surprises that this game has in store for people have all kind of revealed themselves at this point. I feel like if nothing else, we now know what the structure of this game is, like what we're getting into when we fire it up to play every week. So a lot of this, I think, has just been us discovering unknowns, and we've gotten past that point now. So I'm excited to get into the second act of this game and to really see if it's just something that we're feeling more positively about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm getting more used to controls as we go. Still not like fully there, but definitely like getting better. I am very excited to see where this story is going, because it's intriguing in a fun way, in a new and unique way. So there's stuff here to be excited about, and I'm just ready to kind of get to those things. One other thing that Cody didn't mention on his tips and tricks this week is get yourself a long stylus, a longer than average stylus, because that way you're not seeing the back of your own hand while you're playing. So if you haven't done that and you're playing along with us, can't recommend that enough. But look, I think there is room here for this game to make a comeback.
Yeah, Max actually gifted me a longer stylus while I was up there last week. So,
well, that was nice of him.
Because he is a Capital Fellow. So I've been using that, and it is much better.
He's a good man.
He is a good man. Cody, been great talking to you. Catch up with you in a week, okay?
All right. See you then.
Alrighty, y'all. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up and get out of here, and we'll hopefully move on to better things next week. If you enjoyed today's show and you would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it's not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy. Hi, Lians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on Phantom Hourglass Chapter 4. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Of course, Phantom Hourglass can be played on the Nintendo DS or 3DS. Doesn't really matter as long as it's got that cartridge slot. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. Catch y'all next week. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.